this time. Okay, so we should be recording, hopefully.
Mhm.
So, welcome to episode number 3 of the live masterclass. So this one, what do you have in store for us then?
Awesome. So what we're going to do today is we're going to shift perspective, and I'm going to have a conversation about managing the Autodesk Construction Cloud and managing the project ecosystem from like the BIM manager standpoint, with a focus on the project template. There's going to be a little bit mixed in there for just general account management and like some things I've learned, just some lessons I've learned more painful than others sometimes about like how best to go about managing the Autodesk Construction Cloud as it grows. We're going to hit on a couple core topics like setting up your folder structure, managing permissions. We're going to get into what you can and can't set up with the design collaboration module. And then we'll wrap it up with just some of the things that I've learned that I think would be valuable for other team members that are getting into the Autodesk Construction Cloud.
Yeah, all right, let's go going. So do you want to share a
Yeah, let
screen?
me go ahead and kick this off. We'll hit the start slideshow. You got to have a first cover slide. So in case you forgot where you were or who I am, I'm Dan Warren. I'm happy to be here on BIMPure. That's my email address. Please feel free to reach out to me. Unless you're trying to sell me something, then just go ahead and hit me up on LinkedIn.
All right,
Um,
so I'll be keeping an eye on the chat. So if any of you have questions, I'll be
mhm.
fielding them and filtering a bit.
Yeah. Just as a disclaimer here, I have a lot of strengths in this world. PowerPoints are not one of them. So you'll find that my PowerPoints tend to be very bare bones. And if anyone is interested, I am prepared to like switch from PowerPoints to go to actual live demonstration. Since the Autodesk Construction Cloud is currently working, we can go ahead and actually
It's
do
not
some
down.
live presentations. Yeah, it was down yesterday. Um, okay, so we talked about this briefly, the agenda. Why do we want to make a template? Talk about the values of going through template creation. Talk about the company's roles and users. We're going to focus on docs and design collaboration. Then we're going to get into some tips and tricks in BIM 360 versus Autodesk Construction Cloud, and some of the key things you'll need to know along the way. So first off, why would you want to build a template? The number one reason is consistency. If you're a firm of any meaningful size, over like about 100 people that's standardized on the Autodesk Construction Cloud, you're going to find your ecosystem just populated with hundreds of projects. Those projects could be formal engagements, or they could actually just be early development projects like proposals or pursuits or things like that. But the purpose of creating the template is to provide that folder structure consistently, just like you would on your local server for your firm. You wouldn't want people to just willy-nilly be able to create their own folder structures, because then it just sort of turns into this disorganized mess of folders and data, and nobody can really find anything. It also provides consistency in permissions and how permissions are applied to the project on the start. So you know that if if a user has trouble getting into a project, or if a user is having issues, they generally went in and touched your permissions, which you worked really hard to make sure it would work right out the gate, and then it makes actual troubleshooting a bit easier. And it streamlines access to your projects, because your users could just follow a very simple process for adding external team members, and it will generally just work if you've put a little bit of time up front. Um, Same thing with like the project startup process, streamlines it, makes it straightforward. If your BIM team is spinning up all your projects, or if you're empowering your project admins to spin up their own projects, you want a nice consistent process. So once that's consistent, it goes faster. It also expedites training, because you're only having to train on one sort of data set. And it reduces access errors and permission errors, right? As everything is consistently built. And then the final thing I like to put in there is, as with anything that gets standardized, standardizations are, in my opinion, the foundation for innovation. So once the fences are in place, you really learn how to play inside the ballpark, which is why I think it's really important to have a consistent structure and rules on how to use the specific tools, because it facilitates your designers are smart people. They'll figure out good ways to get value out of the tool if you just give them a few borders. So we're going to go into like, how do you actually create a template? It's a three or four step process that we're going to go through. And it starts with like actually creating the template, which seems silly, but that's actually the first step is you create your template. Then you configure the permissions for the template itself. Then you configure your products, which is what we're going to spend a chunk of time on today. And then you actually publish the template. And publishing the template is what makes it active for project admins to create templates, like to create projects from your template. So let's go into step one, is the creation of the template. So in the Autodesk Construction Cloud, there is an actual template button that you click on to create a template. And when you go to create a template, it's very similar to creating a project. This pops up. It says, do you want to create a template blank, or do you want to create a template from an existing project? This is not that different from like creating a template from Revit. You can either create a Revit template from scratch, or you can create a Revit template from an existing project. There's a bit of a trade-off here. I recommend, if you're getting started, start with an existing project. You probably have like one project that you're currently working on somewhere, especially if you're in a conversation or a webinar about creating templates. You've probably created at least a project in your lifetime. So you can refine those settings and then just use that project to create your next template. That's really good if you're like a power user and like an admin that also does production. You can refine your process in project and then push it out, versus like creating a blank template where you're starting from scratch and everything has to be programmed from the ground up. The advantage to create the template from the existing project is all of those settings for your project get copied over, and that basically creates the foundation of your next project. And we'll talk about some of the stuff that does and does not get copied over when you create a project, when you create a template from a project. So I've created this template. It's called inspections. And the first step when you create a template, you give it a name, and then the next step is you configure the permissions for the template. Now, this is a unique window. This is specific to the template itself. This permissions window, when you first create a template, defines who can create a project from this template. It does not define who gets added to the template. So you can create a small team, or like you can empower a BIM manager that's in a department to create the projects for that team or that department. If you actually want to control like who gets added to the project automatically when you create the template, you have to go to the little project picker dropdown and pick project admin. And then in the members tab, this is where I can define, all right, when I create a new project, who gets added to that project and what products do they get access to? And that's as simple as just adding a user like you typically would. Just enter their email address, set their company, set their role, define their access level, and turn on products. Once this is set, every time you spin up this project, those users get added. So we use this because we have a support team of BIM managers that need to be on every single project in the firm. So every time we spin up a project, all 4 of those users get added to every single Autodesk Construction Cloud project. And it automates that, it makes support much easier, and it allows us to like just get in and out as needed really quickly for support and troubleshooting purposes.
Yeah, just a quick one. Does that mean that you have multiple template in this case? One that would add the admins and other one for general, it's all in the same template regardless?
So yeah, that's a great question, Nick. So it's a decision you have to make as a firm. And one of the things I say is you define the process, then you define the product. So we currently use one template for everything. So that template, when a project team submits a startup request, we go in and we spin up the project for them and we add the users. We do some back-end stuff, of which I'll show you a little bit later. And then that is consistent for the entire firm. Now we are learning that there are specific firms, like in our highway inspections group and our facilities assessment group, that they need some tweaks to our base configuration that is just enough to facilitate, okay, like they're going to use Autodesk Build on those products. So we're going to use our Autodesk Build kind of focused template for those teams because it has a whole different folder structure set up. It has all our Autodesk Build backend baked into it. So like you can have multiple templates, and I think it's just like a Revit template, right? You can have, it's the point of a template is to tool it to support a specific process or team, and different teams can work different ways. But with enough effort, you can have like one data structure template that supports all of your projects or most of your projects, depending on the complexity of your services and the team you work with. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the next step after you configure your template permissions, you define who can create a project for the template. You define who's going to be in it, is to set the notifications. And I put this one up front before people like start zoning out, because this is really, really important unless you want to make a lot of enemies really fast. So the Autodesk Construction Cloud is absolutely 100% not afraid to spam your inbox with notifications. And some of these notifications, as you can see, like next to the cost there, are set to instantaneous, right? So that means if you do anything in the cost module that is assigned to that user, they instantly get a notification. Issues is another one. If you use the issues, which I highly encourage everyone to get into using the issues module, it will send a notification by default every time you assign a user a notification. So if you're QCing a set and you're putting a lot of issues in a document, every time you assign that intern an issue, it emails them. So I recommend you go in there into those frequencies and you adjust them. So if it sends an hourly report as opposed to like instantaneously. We completely angered one of our external consultants when we first turned this on, because we started going in and assigning issues, and we didn't realize that like there were like 3 of us sending issues, and we sent them like 70 something emails like in the span of like 20 minutes. So just a heads up, you want to make sure that you get your notifications dialed in. The next thing is also notification permissions. You can control if an end user can change their notifications. So if you don't want somebody to be able to opt out of specific notifications, you can change this from manage to view. And that just means when the user is assigned that notification group, they can't change that specific notification. So if you want them to know every hour on the hour what issues you've assigned to them, or if they have a submittal due or something like that, they can't opt out of it. Additionally, I do recommend creating a notification group for opting out. And this is pretty straightforward. Like, this might be a good time for me to go live on this one, because it's kind of hard to understand in the abstract. So let me see here. Let me switch to my ACC template, and I'm going to go to, here we go, my notifications. So the notification group on the left here, so this is your default one, but you can create additional groups. So I always create an additional group called opt out that has all the notifications turned off. And this is because I spin up a lot of projects that I don't necessarily need any other information other than the project is live, and the team will reach out to me if they need help. If you look closely over here on the far right, the default setting for this is all members of your project. So all members, when they're added, are default added to this default notification setting. But you can create a new notification group, and we'll call this one, opt out to. And then you can set this to companies or roles. So I'm going to come in here and let's say I'm the BIM manager. I really don't need to be notified of things. Then when I create this role, or when I create this group, anyone that has that BIM manager role will be put in this opt-out group. So your roles are extremely important in understanding like how different things function at the actual project level.
So just a quick one. What kind of notification have you found the most helpful to people? Like, are there some notifications that people actually like receiving, or do you find them to be spammy most of the time?
Well, I assume other people enjoy getting emails as much as I do. So what I'll say though is that there's really, it's more about how actionable is the item. And there's two groups of notifications in ACC. There's action required and then just other. These are like your FYI notifications, and these are, you're getting notified because you're expected to do something.
Yeah, someone has assigned you an issue or something like that.
So the issues module has two subsettings, one for when a member is assigned or when a member is mentioned in like a comment on an issue. Now, this is the one I recommend setting this to hourly, because you don't want issues to linger, but at the same time, you don't want to absolutely bury somebody's inbox in like BIM 360 issues. Versus if we get down to like submittals, there's an actual contractual tie to submittals. When the submittal comes in from the GC, the clock starts ticking on the contract. So you may want your document manager to have an instantaneous setup on submittals, so that if they ever get assigned, they immediately know, hey, that there is a submittal, it's hot, it's cooking, and you need to get on, kind of thing. But most people, they dial these down to either hourly or sometimes even daily. So like they just get a wrap up at the end of the day of everything that they need to address. We do that when coordination gets really heavy and we create a lot of coordination issues. We change it to a daily for a lot of users, just so like at the end of the day, all the issues we created in our meeting don't just like blast their email. They get a summary.
I could see someone is away for the office for a couple of days and they come back. If this isn't set up properly, they have like dozens and dozens of emails, right?
That's correct. Okay, let's switch back here. On to the next one. So the next step after you configure your people and your permissions is to configure your products. So for today's conversation, we're going to focus on Autodesk Docs and we're going to focus on design collaboration. And lumped into design collaboration is the coordination module, because they really are tied together now in the ACC ecosystem. We're going to exclude build and we're going to exclude cost management. But I will say that we as a design firm, a predominantly AEC firm, are using build in DD and CD and going into CA. So while it is a construction tool, you can definitely retool it to support design. And the way you actually get into each of these, you have to think like the template has modules, just like a project has modules. So if I want to program my docs, I actually go to the dropdown and I go to the docs module in my template, and then I'm programming it for the actual template. You'll also find that there's a lot of things that you can't do in a template that you can do at the project level. And we'll talk about a couple things. So we'll dig deeper into setup, but then once your stuff is all set up, you can publish your template. And once you toggle that on, anyone that you've given access to can create a new project from that template, right? So that's how you as an admin can create your template and give it to like a BIM manager and say, all right, BIM manager, you can go ahead and manage all the K-12 or higher ed projects as needed, right? So before we get into docs and folder structure, nothing's more exciting than reviewing folder structures, right? I want to take a moment to talk about members, companies, and roles. This is extremely important. And Nick, thanks for sharing episode 1 with me. That definitely gave me a lot to address here. So the first one is the question of like managing members. So there's a lot of—
If I can say something quickly, we're chatting a bit just before the show, and there was one question that came up during the first session is, do you add users? You're going to get to it, you don't have to answer now. But do you add users to the admin portal? You add them straight for each individual project. And I've always done it to admin, but some people thought it was a better idea to do it for each project.
Correct. So I will tell you how I have come to manage them, and it works for me, and it's worked for me for the better part of the last decade. I approach the Autodesk Construction Cloud. You want the data in it to be as clean as your ERP. You really want the companies to be clean and tight. You want the roles to be clean and tight. And what I will do, along with all of our processes, it's basically internal versus external. if it is a CPL employee that is joining the firm, I go into the back end and I program their default role and company so that every project they ever get added to going forward, they automatically get the correct permissions and company, right? And that just, so to the project managers, they just invite the, Johnny, the intern, and it works, right? For external people, I totally understand the need for project admins to be able to just rapidly add external consultants as needed. So I don't require them to go through us to get users added to their project. They can just add members. They just have to follow our processes and set the roles correctly. And then what we'll do, it's an unfortunate task, but it facilitates the way it works. We have to go in and we have to routinely audit and clean up users, right? That is just, there's no good bulk tool to do this. I know people have built them, but this is a huge struggle that we have managing the ACC at size. We're knocking on almost 700 active projects on ACC, and like policing members is just huge activity, and there's no good bulk tools for managing it. So if you know of a good solution, let me know, because I spend a lot of effort just cleaning up our ACC stuff. Companies are also really, really important. Like, remember, try to approach this as an ERP. It's a database. So one of the first things I recommend anybody that's getting into Autodesk Construction Cloud, before the genie is out of the bottle, go into the admin settings and turn off the ability to create new companies, because people will fat finger company names. And if you don't have this turned off, when they hit enter, it will just automatically create a new company. And then your company list will get heavily polluted with like nonsense company names or misspelled company names and stuff like that. So you want to keep that back end nice and clean and tight. And then finally, roles. So roles are super, super important. And what you're looking at in the middle here is our default roles. We carved these way down from the Autodesk out of the box roles you get, because we went through and we actually created definitions for each of the roles. In the template settings, or like this is actually at the project level, when you're setting these roles, the only thing you're setting is, when I assign this role to a user, do they get project member or project admin rights? That's all you're setting here. But the function of the role goes much, much deeper. It has implications on your folder structure, implications on permissions. And just to kind of show you how we have ours organized, we have basically internal in red and external in blue. And if you really dig into these, you'll find that, like, why do I have a VDC manager role and a BIM manager role? Well, BIM is internal and VDC is external, because we don't use VDC as a term in my company, but I know that GCs do. So we try to align it with common terminology, but sometimes things come up. So as long as your roles are well defined, they generally will just work pretty well. One of the things we ran into is we ended up having to remove designer and intern, which were two roles that were in our permission stack. And the reason we did that was architects and engineers kept going in and finding users that had the role architect assigned to them, and they would change their role from architect to intern, because I guess it offended their sensibilities. And then they would effectively lock that person out of the project. Then we would get a support ticket saying, hey, I can't access my project anymore. And we'd go in, and lo and behold, somebody took away their architect role. So these are the things you kind of have to think about when you're setting up your ecosystem. So just, you really want to be careful with roles here. And just a side note, I don't have a good slide for this, but if you delete a role that's in use, it will put in brackets next to it everywhere it shows up in Autodesk Construction Cloud removed, which is super confusing for your users to see, like, intern removed, and it's like, what does that mean? So you want to be really careful adjusting roles, especially removing them once they're in use. All right, so we're going to get into the meat and the potatoes of the project setup stuff. We're going to get into document management. So the first thing is the folder structure. And Nick, in episode 1, you talked about the creation of folders. So I'm not going to spend too much time on, like, how does one create a folder? I do have 2 important references on this deck, which I'll gladly share with you, Nick, so you could distribute. The 2 file path limitations, one is for Autodesk Docs and the other is for the desktop connector. Basically, you have a pretty decent length. Like, I think you can go a maximum of 25 files deep before like docs will stop you from creating new subfolders. The bigger issue you're going to run into is not necessarily the folder structure on the cloud. It's if you need to sync that data locally with the Autodesk desktop connector. So with that, I think it's like a 250 character limit or 240 something character limit. Anything beyond that, and like the data won't sync back and forth, and there's all kinds of limitations with Civil 3D that they're working through, and it's constantly under development. But like, what you want to do is you want to keep your folders kind of simple if you can.
So are you saying, for example, if you link a CAD file inside of Revit through the desktop connector, if there are too many subfolders and the path is longer than 250 characters, you might have issues there?
Yes, absolutely. And also remember that in the local folder path that Autodesk Construction Cloud creates for like the desktop connector, it includes the project name. So the length of your project name can eat up your, like how much space you have on the back end for file storage. So that's why we actually ended up having, we used to put our job number in all of our job names, but we had to stop doing that because we realized, oh my goodness, we're taking away a ton of file path for our users. So going in and setting up your permissions is pretty straightforward. An important thing to note is that you can only set up permissions in a template by role. You cannot do it by company or by user. There was a recent caveat to that if the user is defined in the template already, you can. But my best practice for everyone is just do everything by role. And then it's much easier to add and remove roles than it is to do it by individual users. So you can see on the left, these are all the roles we have defined out of the box for my firm. There's architect, engineer, external consultant, and inspector, and that's it. We have other roles that are defined specifically for use in Autodesk Build, but this is all we need. This facilitates design collaboration, it facilitates coordination. It's everything we need with 3 roles, of which only one of them is used for people outside the firm. An important thing to note is there is now an everyone role. So be very careful with everyone role. We actually have a hidden folder that everyone is the only role that can see that folder. And in it is a README file that says, if you can read this, you've been added incorrectly to the project, please contact your project admin. And it's just a check so that when someone goes to the project, they can see like, is this thing working or not? And roles are set at the folder, permissions are set at the folder level and they inherit downward. And this is really important to understand because this gives you really granular control. So talking about our external consultants, we've got the design folder, which is where we put all of our like teams for design collaboration. The external consultant role has view only access there, view and download to be more specific. But when they get to structural, we bump that up to external consultant, or whenever they get to whatever team they're filling in on, because sometimes we have internal consultants, sometimes we have external consultants. And what this means is that they can edit the information in their folder, they can access their stuff in design collaboration, but they can't edit anyone else's access. So you have very finite control over what they can see and what they can access. This is how you can create like specific access issues. So the question that comes up to me a lot is like, well, we don't want to put just everything on the cloud because anyone can access it. Well, that is one way of managing your data. But I think security is a big important thing to keep in mind when you're putting all your data in one place that other people can access. So in this example you're currently seeing, the role architect is assigned to the BIM plan folder because I would want the architect to be able to see the BIM plan. That could be a contractor, it could be owner, whatever. It's just the only folder under admin they can see is the BIM plan. They also have edit access to the design folder where the architectural and structural folders exist, right? Red and blue. So just remember that they can see the BIM plan and they can edit their Revit files. So the default behavior of a setup like this, when I create a new project and this goes live, the architect will be able to see the BIM plan. They'll also be able to see the folder structure of the admin and the project files folder. So they'll be able to see the folder path that got them to 04 BIM plan, but they won't see any other folders under admin. So this is how you can lock people out of sections of your project. Design, where the architect has to work on their stuff. They have access to architecture, they have access to structural. Revit live links will work, it's all set up. There is a feature I want to show you where you can turn off the visibility of the folder path. This is not a template function, but as a project admin, you may want to do this. If you don't want them to see the admin folder or the project files folder, it hides this. I'm going to show you all how to do that right now. So in my docs project, all the settings for each of the modules is on the far right. It's a little confusing sometimes, but I go to advanced settings and you just turn on or off show folder path. If you turn this off, if the user cannot see the folder, they won't see the folder structure that leads them to that folder, if that makes sense.
And do users typically prefer that, or they like to see the root folder, even if they cannot access them directly?
Well, users generally, as we found, actually do like seeing that. Whoops, I hit the wrong button. They actually do like seeing the folder structure. And I'll explain it if I can find where I just was. Here we are. Here it is. So on the right, with this show folder path turned off, notice that it files 04 BIM plan as if it was on the same level as 01 design in the folder structure. Versus I can clearly see on the left with the default behavior that the BIM plan is under my admin structure. So that's why most people actually like seeing the default behavior. The good news is they won't see any of the sister folders in admin. They just see the folder path that got them to 04 BIM plan. And ultimately, it kind of just boils down to how you want to manage your security and how you want to manage your data, right?
Yeah. There's a question from John Segler. It seems like using roles for permission levels instead of company, you will give engineers permission to edit other disciplines' data.
Yeah, that's a great talking point. And let me explain how we do it, and I will explain how I did it at my previous firm. So because we have engineering in-house, we just use the term engineer. We don't use mechanical engineer, structural engineer, plumbing engineer, electrical engineer. We don't subdivide engineering. You can totally set up your permissions so that when somebody's added to the project, you assign them the role that matches the folder they should be working in. So I have a team that's electrical engineer. I add, Sparky the engineer to that project. I give him the electrical engineering role. Now he can work in the electrical engineering world, or he can, but he can't work in anyone else's folder, if that makes sense. What we used to do at my previous firm is we would break it down, and it ended up, the problem being is unless your project managers really understand how your permissions functions, you spend a lot of time just troubleshooting permissions. And I'm going to go back to the BIM 360 team days. This is a high trust environment at its core. And you really need to have conversations with your project partners like, hey, everything will go smoothly if you just kind of work in your team folder. And if you need something out of the architecture or structural folder, you just reach out. But yes, you can dial it in if you want. We personally have earmarked the electrical, mechanical, structural, and plumbing engineering roles for electrical, mechanical, structural, and plumbing submittals in Autodesk Build. So when those submittal types come in, they automatically go to the correct person. Okay, so this is a pretty brief conversation about attributes. So you can add attributes to folders and files in Autodesk Construction Cloud. This is going to be a really short conversation because I really don't know the best way to use this. I imagine it becomes much more useful when you start reporting on files and you start using third-party connections to tap into your data. But I have seen teams that will create an attribute called reviewed, and then they just say it's just yes, no. Like, so has the project manager reviewed this? Yes. Have they not? No. And it's just a data field. It's like a parameter in Reddit. I don't particularly like that because, as you'll see in a second, like there's actually a review mechanism you can set up in Docs that serves to actually do reviews, and it manages reviews. But you could just remember that you can add parameters called attributes to any file or folder in the Autodesk construction file. And I think they could be a number, they could be a date, or they could be a text string. And that's pretty much it. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about reviews. The review process, very simply, is just, I have a chunk of data, I want to give it to somebody else, and I want them to review it. Or I could give that to multiple somebody else's, and they review it, right? It's also kind of used as like a poor man's submittal, right? Because Autodesk Docs is very cheap to get into as far as like how expensive Autodesk products can be. So you can create and pre-configure review settings, and these tie into your permissions. And we'll dive into actually the creation of a review process here in a second. But on the left are all the different types of reviews you can create for your projects. The simplest one is just the one-step review. I send it to somebody, they review it, it comes back. Then there's 2 steps, 3 steps. There's like, you can have like full committees involved in a review process if you really need to. And I'm assuming this supports more complicated folder management processes like ISO 19650 and so on. We just have one out of the box, and that's owner review. I'm going to show you guys how to set that up.
Just a quick question. What kind of files do you typically review? Is it models, PDFs, other files, BIM execution plans?
Yeah, so you can bundle anything in a review.
Okay.
What we are currently using it for, and we're still mostly testing this, but we're getting positive feedback, is adding the owner to our project. We send like the CD or milestone deliverable via review to them, and then they can like approved, noted, questions, things like that, right? It's really great because we've really struggled in the past to quantify owner review or owner approval of scopes of work or deliverables, and this like makes it concretely clear. So I'm going to show you, this is my testing, this is the template project. You could do this, you could do everything I'm about to show you actually in a template as opposed to in a project. So when I go to create a review, whoops, that's if it's already defined. I'm going to go here to settings, so it gets me to, okay, now I'm going to create an approval workflow. So this is an approval workflow. I just want to do one-step review, me, client, client back. All right, so this is going to be my workflow. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a name, client review. Give it a description. And then you can actually see the process, and that gray bar on next to the steps will update as I change this review. So who can initiate this review? I can, because I'm in a project, I can pick people, but this one can only be done by role at the template level if you want to preset these reviews. So I want the engineer and I want the architect to be able to use this approval. And then for each step, there's an approver, and I can come in here and I can assign it to owner. So when this review is created, it will automatically go to the owner once it's initiated. Let's say I want to give them, let's give them, 7 business days. I don't want to do calendar days. I want to do work days. It does not include, I don't think it accounts for holidays. So you just need to be aware of that. And if you want the owner to be able to kick this back, you can enable the ability to kick it back to the initiator if needed. And then this is where it sort of becomes a submittal process, right? You can create different values for the approval status. So it's basically approved or rejected. And we'll say rejected, but we'll say, for formation. And then you could change this little icon to say, hey, it's just for information. We're not approving this because approval has like a risk implication to it. And then this is what I really like is when it's done, you can say, hey, I want you to copy the files that were approved, everything that's been submitted. I want you to put that in a specific folder. And we have in our shared folder, a folder for the owner that just shared to owner. And that's where we'll drop it. So when it gets approved, it puts a copy of everything that was approved in the folder that's for the owner. And then you've got notes for the workflow. And if you want people to be able to update attributes, you can. But then that's basically it. And once it's done, now under my approval workflows, sorry, let me go back to my reviews. Now I can create, I pick a file here. I don't think I actually have any files. So there we go. I have a Revit file here. Now I can come in here and say, all right, I'm going to send this to my client review process. So reviews are really cool. I would highly recommend you check them out if you can. So I am going to go into issues now. Issues is one of the most powerful tools in Autodesk Construction Cloud. Because like I'm guilty of it too. I write things down on paper, but I can't report on paper. My project manager can't see what's going on in my notebook. But if I use issues, everything in issues reports upward. So you can see what issues you have on all your projects, and so can your project manager. Issues can be pre-set up. And I want you to approach issues like it's just a to-do. It's just a question. It's just a thing that needs to be addressed. People get really hung up on the organization of issues and what words mean. It's really not as complex as people make it out to be. If you just put, it's just something that needs to be done, right? It's like, it's a to-do on my to-do list. It makes it much easier. You can go into the issues module, go to the settings on the right, and then these are the different things at the bottom that you can program into your issues. So you have categories. These are just buckets, right? These hold different types of issues. You can almost think of this like it's like a family and a type. A family of issues is coordination. A family of issues is commissioning. Everything with the lock is out of the box. You can't remove it from your project, but you can deactivate it. There's no right or wrong answer when it comes to permissions, for issues. Just kind of think of like what stuff you typically want to record and you want to track to completion.
Just a quick question. Are the name of the different kind of issues, categories, are these set for a company or they're set in a template?
They are set at the project template level.
Template, okay.
Yep, so you can predefine all of your issues for your projects before they go live. So here you're seeing this is a snippet from a couple of our projects. I'm just showing you on the left, you can just pick a category and turn it on or off. We have whole categories that are reserved for construction administration, and that's all they're used for. So when the project starts, these are all turned off by default. And then when we get to CA, the project team turns them on. And what that does is that just prevents us from using CA geared issues during design development in CD. Within each category, there are types. So these are the actual things that you're identifying. You can give them like a little up to 3-character note, ADA, BC. This is our out of the box for design. You'll notice that accessibility, door hardware, and existing condition and life safety are all turned off because to us, those are all building code issues. So everything that's building code related, we just use the building code issue. You can add issues if you want. You can customize them. What you want to think about is like, what do you want to track? If I wanted to know all of a specific type of issue across my project, how would I start documenting that? And this is where custom fields can come in. You can create custom fields. It's very simple. It's like adding parameters to issues. These facilitate coordination, filtering, reporting, process improvement. For example, all of our issues have a specification dropdown. So when you create an issue, you can tie it to a specification. And it's literally just a parameter in the issue that you can set. We also have one called related discipline. So if you want to, like, if it's an architectural coordination thing, but you need to talk to the plumber, you'll say related discipline, plumbing. That way the architect knows to like go talk to the plumber. And then you have root causes. This is really much more about process improvement. We haven't gotten personally deep enough into this, but this is if you want to start identifying what's causing issues, you can start addressing the underlying issues, like what's causing problems. If it's training, now I know I can address training, and then I can report on my issues, see how many training related issues have we been able to eliminate through like a training program or something like that. So then there's issue templates, and issue templates are just pre-configured issues that you can create. And I'm gonna actually, this is a little bit hard to understand the abstract, so we're gonna go live again. So I'm gonna jump down to my issues module, and I'm gonna go to my settings. So your templates, your issue template is just a pre-configured issue. It has data pre-assigned to it. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to call this a graphics coordination issue, because I know I'm going to have coordination like graphic issues on my project. I'm going to assign its type. We're going to put it under design, and we'll just call it design. Give it a useful description. Clean up line work, coordinate visibility settings, easy. That's driving my OCD nuts. Little red lines. Then you could preset who this gets assigned to by role, company, or user. Role is best in my opinion. So if I want to assign this to the architect, I can. You may want to choose to leave that blank. It depends on how tightly you tool your template. You can add a watcher if you want to, or you could program where you can leave these blank and then you fill them in when you create them. If I know that like the person with the architect role is going to get this every time, that's what I'm going to assign it to. Then you can set a due date by days from the creation, and I can assign a root cause. So now that I've done that, when I go to create an issue, I can just say it's a graphics coordination issue, and it will populate it with all of this information automatically.
We have a couple of questions about issues from Mel asking, could you change the color of the shape of the issue?
The only way you can change the color of the issue is by changing its status. So that is something we've been round and round with Autodesk on in the actual issues module. Issues, the only thing that changes their color is their status, which I'm about to talk about statuses here in a second, but like you can refine what statuses are available, but it's color coded for you automatically, unfortunately. The only thing you can change is the characters inside the bubble.
And Tara is asking, what is a watcher?
So a watcher is it's like a CC in an email for an issue. Any change that happens to that issue, the watcher gets notified of. So let's say, I'd say I'm a GC and I got a project engineer out in the field and I assign him an issue. Go get the barcode from a piece of equipment. When he goes and attaches a screenshot or a photo of that barcode to the issue, I'll get a notification, right? Or if the status changes from open to closed, I'll get a notification. It's just so you can keep somebody in the loop on an ongoing activity. That's really all it is. So I equate it to like a CC. Okay, I know we're getting tight on time here, right? So let's do this. Let's switch up here, and we're going to jump to design collaboration. So I totally skipped over statuses. There's like 7 out-of-the-box statuses that you can pre-configure. It's a pretty out of the box. These are all turned on, and it's a pretty complex, like nuanced issue management workflow. We just use draft, open, closed, and completed. That's all we use. We turn the rest of them off because I don't want architects getting into a pissing match about, no, it's in review. No, it's not approved. Like it's either open and it needs to be addressed, or it's closed and we can move on. That's pretty much it. Okay. So unfortunately, this next section is going to be really short because there's not a lot you can do in design collaboration other than defining the shared folder. You can define the shared folder for all your projects. And obviously your folder structure will come over. You can define your teams. So you just go in and you assign the folder. What does not get picked up is the publish schedule, which is kind of sad because we'll talk about in a second. There was a JSON workflow that was great. But you can create all your teams. And this is actually our default team list out of the box for all of our projects. So these all get set up automatically for the team members. And you'll see that there's an ARC ID there with one folder, with one published model there. That is us starting the project. And then we go in and delete that. And I'll talk about that in just a second. So what you can set up is a shared folder. You can set up your teams. Asterisk there is if you create teams from, if you create your template from an existing project, the teams are not copied over. You have to still manually create your team structure in your template. They may fix that in the future. Your default team members can be pre-set up because you know you've got the files, you've got the members. You can set that up, but the members must already be in the project template. We just basically let everyone into everything unless they're an external consultant. And then you can control what folders are actually included in a team. So on the right there, you have a toggle that says select folders. And I'll show you exactly where that is. I go to design collaboration, go to settings. This is, no, that's my bridge automation. Team setup. This is it. This is where I can set my members. And then in your template, you can set your folders right here, which is now over here in the actual project level. But this is where I can say, I do want to include folder 1, 2, 3, but I want to exclude a specific folder from a team. I have not found an actual useful reason to lock down folders in a Autodesk Construction Cloud team, but that's because we don't use controlled work sharing. We do everything live linked. But you should know as an admin, you have the ability to lock out folders in a team from design collaboration.
Yeah, so that you're saying you should do everything with live links, no exceptions, or okay.
Well, there are exceptions, but you know, there's a lot of hemming and hawing and grunting, you know, and grumbling before we'll give, but we prefer to work live.
And then what's the point of the design collaboration module if everything is live linked? Is it
For us,
access to the folders? Yeah.
For us, it facilitates the automatic publishing.
Oh, okay, for its publishing, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is brings you like what you can't set up in the template is you can't set up the publish schedule in the template. I will show you though, how you can do it for your teams on their behalf. You can't set up the collaboration spaces, which is sad. You can't set up the main model settings, which is sad. And the DWG support, you can't really interact with it, but it's always default on because if people are pushing DWGs up, you want those included in coordination, which makes sense. But the sad thing is you can't do the auto publish setup. So that's my first tips and tricks section. If you want to automatic set up auto publish for your team members, you start your project, you push a Revit file to the project, you set your publish settings, and then you delete that Revit project. So as soon as your project team pushes a Revit file to that project, it automatically turns on the publish schedule because the publish schedule is defined. Couple other important things to note, BIM 360 versus ACC. For user management, you cannot disable users from the ACC module. You have to go to the BIM 360 module to disable them. And disabling is important because if you remove them, it nulls the information associated with that user out of all Autodesk Construction Cloud projects. So if you have issues, if you have RFIs, you have submittals, and you remove that user, it used to just say literally null in parentheses, but now I think it says previous user or something like that. It doesn't give you anything useful. So as an admin, when people leave the firm, I go in, I just deactivate. I don't delete users from our Autodesk Construction Cloud ecosystem.
Yeah, just a quick thing. On the first session, I mentioned, generally speaking, BIM 360 isn't being developed anymore, so all new projects should be started in ACC. But there's actually a few things that BIM 360 has over ACC. That's one of them. Yep. So how do you deal with this? All your new projects are still on ECC, right?
Yeah, we do everything. Everything new is on Autodesk Construction Cloud, and it's just a discomfort that the practice technology team has to manage. as I say, but wait, there's more. In BIM 360, I can pull a list of all the projects a user's on. You cannot do this in Autodesk Construction Cloud, or if you can, it's a new functionality. Because I have been complaining about this for a very long time. But as you see, I can, in BIM 360, I can grab a user and see every single project, and I can actually see, are they a project member or a project admin on that project, which makes it very easy to audit a project, because if you don't want external people as project admins, you can see what projects they are set as admin on. This may have been adjusted in Autodesk Construction Cloud, but last I checked, it definitely wasn't like a set list, like here's the user, here's all the projects. What I do like about Autodesk Construction Cloud is you can define a default product. So in the home screen, whenever you're looking at projects, in the middle, there's a dropdown. And you could say, well, when I go here, I always want to go to build, or I always want to go to docs. And then when you set it, it remembers that for you next time. So if you ever access that project again, it goes just directly to the docs module, as opposed to like, I have to go to build, then I have to go to docs.
Which one do you typically like to go to docs or?
Typically docs. It defaults to build, which defaults to the folder structure, which is where I'm doing most of my support. So it's, for me, it's 6 in one, half dozen in the other. But for like our project teams, they definitely want to just go straight to docs. They don't want to have to mess with the build ecosystem. They see the build ecosystem and they freak out sometimes. So, but you can't do that in BIM 360. It always takes you to the project home in BIM 360 by default. And then the thing that I'm super sad about is BIM 360 supported JSON setup, which controlled your folder structure, your members, your permissions, your publish schedule, and your team colors. You could see a snippet of the old JSON file I used to use, and you could see about the middle where it says schedule publish type is set to weekly every Saturday on the hour 4. And then the email is like, who is pushing the publish? As opposed to like, it just automatically publishes. So it's sad. I used to be able to just create a project and upload a JSON, and it created everything you needed in ACC, but it's not that big a deal. Like just.
And so JSON, just to give a bit of context, it's basically a file to automate the creation of certain aspects when you create a new project, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, so I was really sad when this went away, but at the same time, like they're always working on ACC, and the development on it has been super crazy. So it's one of those things that if you just wait long enough and you ask nicely, Autodesk will probably give you what you're looking for.
There's a question from John Segler saying, should there be any rush to use ACC instead of BIM 360?
So I get this question a lot, and for firms like us that are trying to displace the new Forma ecosystem with the Autodesk Build ecosystem, now that I truly believe it has one-for-one parity, there's no reason whatsoever to use BIM 360 at all. I had some slides and cut them. Autodesk has a tool that's in private beta that you could just ask your reseller about, and they can get you into it. It's called the Autodesk Replication Tool. And what it will do is it will take everything from a BIM 360 project and push it into an Autodesk Construction Cloud project. The only thing it doesn't do is Workshare cloud models. So if you have a big project you want to migrate to ACC, other than the Workshare cloud models, you can push all that data to ACC to come into the new ecosystem. Obviously, ACC has the reporting functionality, which is way more robust at the admin and executive level than BIM 360. And it's way more open-ended as far as API goes. So it's easier to create your own add-ins and tools that manipulate the ACC data than in BIM 360. And then that's it. That's all I got. Just a hair over time, I know, but I'm Dan Warren. I appreciate your time, and I will stick around for as many questions as y'all want to think up.
All right. Well, there was a comment from Benjamin, who's right there on the camera, and who's going to be teaching the session on Monday, saying that APS, I think that's Autodesk Platform Service, whatever it's called, like that could replace some of the JSON.
Yes, it certainly can. And I've had conversations with developers about what they could help us build to make our life easier. I know that the Autodesk Platform Services is the key, formerly known as Forge, if you knew what Forge was.
Yeah.
It is the key to automation and success, but I just don't have the skill set to get there yet.
Okay, let's see. There are some more questions that I've kept. We have an issue where consulting engineers can only access the Revit Cloud model if they are set up as project admin. When set up as project manager, they cannot access the Revit Cloud models. Any thoughts on this?
So is it project admin versus project
Yeah,
member or okay?
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So if the user is a project member, the roles and the permissions of the folder structure define access. And it is about as reliable as the visibility graphics settings in Revit. I have found that if you dig into it, you can almost always find a permission setting that is causing somebody not to be able to access something. They have to have edit level permission as a minimum in order to access the Revit file from Revit in a folder, which I know that wavered a little bit throughout time, but it is now like if they don't have edit functionality, they can't edit the live Revit file in for Revit. And it has to be cloud work shared enabled too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that was the first one from Matt Calton. Or the default user assigned to each new project. Is there a way to assign default by role rather than by individual user? For example, if we have 500 projects and we bring in a new employee in a BIM manager role, can we assign them to a role at the organization level and have they populate to all existing projects?
Sadly, no, there's not. There is not a way to do that. At my previous firm, I had an IT guy that was pretty good, and he built up a tool that would go through and add a user to every project in Autodesk Construction Cloud. Brace your inbox because you got absolutely swarmed with invites, but there is no way to like create like a BIM manager role and then assign that to somebody and then have that person added to every project. You have to create some sort of widget to do that.
I see there was a question from Mela. Is there any option to receive notification twice or 3 times a day?
I know it depends on the issue, on like what you're getting a notification on. For issues, you can at people in an issue and it will send them a notification. So if you just keep going into the issue and keep adding them, it will keep sending them a notification. Now, if their notifications are set to by the hour, then they're only going to get that once an hour with a summary of like, hey, like Dan added you 5 times on this one issue. You might want to go look at that issue. If your settings are set to instantaneous, yes, you certainly can do that. Just add somebody over and over again. That seems like a great way to make enemies where I come from. But other than if a task is overdue. Now, if a task is overdue or to do an issue is past its due date, I think it will notify you once a day that you have an overdue issue. Or it will roll up to your home screen when you log into Autodesk Construction Cloud, and you'll have like a bar that says like past due issues. But there's no way to like just following up kind of email somebody.
Another question from Matt. How do you approach creating Revit files as best practice in ACC? We are looking at an option to pre-link work shared models .rvt to use as templates.
So files placed into file folders in your template will now copy out to the same folder in the new project. That does not work for Workshare cloud models. You can still preset up like your dummy placeholder links in your Revit template. That totally works. Then you just reload from to the Revit file that's in the correct location on the Autodesk Construction Cloud. If you have all of your like work sharing set up in your template, it actually doesn't copy over. I think it actually just copies the raw Revit file, but it doesn't actually create like the work sharing setup that you need or the linking setup. Yeah, shoot is correct.
Okay, what else did I have for you? So do you use the model coordination tools a lot, that Clash Matrix?
We do. We use it heavily. In fact, we are approaching a requirement in our firm where if it is a new construction project, you must go through a 3D model coordination process. And we have an internal team that will manage that for you. Unfortunately, there's just not a lot as far as templates go that you can do to set that up. And for us, it has completely displaced Navisworks. Like I uninstalled Navisworks from my machine. Not that I don't love Navisworks and it has a special place in my heart, but if I never have to open that product again, I'll be happy for the rest of my life. But it's so intuitive and it scales perfectly for the purposes of design coordination. So we use model coordination day in and day out on our projects.
And okay, so what I've heard that it's much better than the default Revit interference check.
Oh
And
yeah,
it's
goodness.
about
Oh, yeah.
similar to Navisworks in terms of how good it is.
I would say that if I was doing construction coordination again, like I did at the beginning of my career, Navisworks offers you a much higher degree of issue grouping and tracking and management. And you can create shared views and push them to the Autodesk Construction Cloud. But for an architecture and engineering firm, like coordinating for design is way easier than coordinating for construction. So it fits perfectly for us because it's like, okay, you've got a duct and that duct, I pick that duct and I can see, oh, it's hitting 7 beams. Well, that's all one issue and it makes that very easy. It's like a step up from glue. If you ever worked with glue, it's more automated, it's more user friendly, and all of your setup, we manage it directly from Revit. So like you use Revit to set up your model coordination on Autodesk Construction Cloud.
Do you use any kind of a third-party apps like Revisto or BIMtrack, known as Newforma Connect, or any of these tools, or everything in ACC is sufficient?
We do everything in the ACC. It just suffices for us.
Mm-hmm.
We are also very much more hands-on in the coordination process. Like I said, with if I needed the highly precise degree of tracking that Navisworks affords you, then maybe it'd be a different story. But once we got our coordination process in place, we're like, we don't actually have to go to Navisworks at all. We do everything from the Revit file. And then all the architect has to do is like, go click on the clash and they can see, oh, here's all my ceiling clashes. So here's all my light fixture clashes. Like, it makes it super easy for the design team.
I see. So I'm really wondering how you set up the views and the models clash together, because you said all the disciplines are typically they're all in-house, right?
Well, if you invite me back, I'm happy to show you how that process works.
Yeah, it's a big one, right?
Yeah, it is all managed from the architectural project right now, simply because we don't go into our consultants' models, so we can do everything from the architectural model.
So you would create different views in the model, publish these views, and clash these different views together.
Yes, sir.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I think we've went through most of the question. If you guys have questions, now's the time. Then I'm gonna put this to an end.
Yeah. I will say that I always tell people that they should approach the Autodesk Construction Cloud as a project management platform that does way more than just support the live linking of Revit files. And when you dig into it and you start thinking about, well, how do we currently do things? It definitely can add a lot of value to how you manage your projects and the insight you get into your projects.
Yeah, definitely. I guess, working on the cloud with Revit files, that's kind of the low-hanging fruit, and it takes some time to get familiar with the setup. Once you do, I agree, it's totally worth it to get in these advanced feature where it can be issues and markups and approval, which I didn't know that much about, and that I was happy to say today. This question from Matt about content catalog. So are you using any third-party apps, or are you waiting for that Unify add-in? It's supposed to be coming in soon.
So we used the Unify platform long before Autodesk decided to purchase them. And I've been in part of the content catalog beta for a while now, and it's coming along nicely. I still think the unified platform itself needed some investment, and I think Autodesk is bridging that gap. What is really cool, I think, about it is that it's all HTML based in its future state. So there isn't like a unified app on your local machine. You do the searching through a web portal, which is much faster and more reliable. However, like, since it's not out, I can't really speak to like features and functionalities of it.
You signed an NDA?
Yeah, but I'm also like, I just don't know what I am and am not allowed to talk about.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But yes, the content catalog is coming, and I do know that like there is an intent in the future to integrate it with the Autodesk Construction Cloud and basically bring that portal in.
Yeah, I've heard it's getting released quite soon. Anyway, I don't have any precise date, but yeah, it's certainly before the end of the year.
It should definitely be before Q3. Safe harbor.
Yeah. So yeah, some people are asking you to come back for talk about model coordination. Well, we have Ben on next session. We should be talking about it a little bit, isn't it, Ben?
Yep, we'll talk a bit about that.
Yeah. So yeah, just be clear, Ben, right there, he's gonna come on Monday. He's on the MEP side at CIMA. He's gonna talk about advanced collaboration, and we should explore the model coordination module. And Ben, can you say, you just typed your question? Can you say it out loud since you're there?
Yeah, sure. So then how do you manage clashes within the same model, but with also the same categories? So let's say you have a air supply dock systems that goes, but you know there are clashes, but you want to make sure that ACC will get that clash. How do you manage that?
So is it about like categorizing the types of clashes that you identify in the module?
It's more to basically for model coordination to recognize that the same categories can be clashed or the same system can be clashed.
Yeah, so it depends on the project. The more complex projects, what we'll do is we'll create highly specific views from the architectural model that just see like one specific mechanical system. So like just return or just transfers or just, and that allows us to very like precisely clash parts of the model. And because you can bring multiple models, multiple views together into a single model, it makes it pretty easy to like just filter out specific systems or identify specific elements. For example, we do it with, we have one view that sees nothing but ceilings, right? Which is a problem when people decide to use ceilings as their finished floor material, but that's a different story. But that way the architect can just rapidly go in and they can literally look at they could just look at their project like from the north view or from the front view, and they could see, are there any like ceilings that are below, any like mechanical equipment that's below the ceilings. But yeah, we want to get to doing it directly from the MEP and structural models so that when we assign issues, they go to the user and they can access them in Revit and actually work on them in Revit, but we just haven't gotten there quite yet.
All right.
I'm really excited. I can't wait to see your presentation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward for this one.
All right, so I think this is going to be it for today, unless there's a really last minute question. Doesn't seem like it. So thanks a lot, Dan. That was super interesting. I did take note. I did learn a lot, and especially about templates. Yeah, maybe I just have a quick one. If we're to recap what's included in templates, we have the folders, we have the permissions, we have, so what else is included in there? Exactly, the roles.
Folders, permissions, there's any files or folders that you place in your folder structure. It's like if you have like process documents, those get copied out. Issues, all your issue templates, all your issue settings, types, categories, statuses, things like that. Your reviews, your model coordination team, your design collaboration teams, not your published settings, and then there's a whole host of things when you get into build and cost. But I think for today's conversation, that covered just about everything.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to be exploring template in the next few weeks. So thanks a lot for that. Let me just